Have you read The Color Purple, one of the 5 most widely read books in the United States? Do you know what links its author, Alice Walker, to the Cuban Revolution? We'll find out in a moment. Welcome to the Digital University of La Réunion. We hope you are doing well. Today is a special day for 2 reasons. It's our first talk in English, and I apologize in advance for my accent. Second, we have a special guest, Alice Walker. What can we say about Alice Walker? She's a feminist activist who places freedom and social justice at the heart of her work. She was involved from an early age in the struggle against the racial segregation of black people in the United States. After brilliant studies, she took up writing and published her first book of poetry at the age of 24, while simultaneously pursuing an academic career at prestigious universities such as Berkeley, where she taught literature and African American studies. Alice Walker is the first black woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for her novel, The Color Purple, which is one of the 5 most widely read books in the United States. Alice has been strongly influenced by the Cuban Revolution and its universal message of emancipation, and she has been fighting for years against the economic sanctions that hit the island's populations. She's also deeply committed to the fight for environmental preservation and human progress. Alice, thank you so much for joining us. It's a great honor to have you at the Digital University of La Réunion.
I'm delighted to be with you.
Let's start with our first question. Who is Alice Walker? Where and when were you born? And what memories do you have of your childhood?
I was born in the southern part of the United States, way in the countryside, so it was very beautiful. I had my parents and my brothers and sisters. Well, one sister left when I was 1 year old. But we had our own community. There was segregation, of course, but as children, we didn't notice it. We were in a community of other people who cared about us. And I loved my parents. We were close to my grandparents. They were close enough so that I could sneak away and visit them whenever I wanted.
As you said, racial segregation marked your entire adolescence and your young adult life. What were the daily expressions of this state policy of discrimination based on skin color, which imposed indelible suffering on men, women, children, and remains today in the collective memory?
Well, for one thing, we never had decent housing. And also, we could be forced to move almost every year, not quite every year, but very often. And my father and my mother worked really very hard to keep us from from feeling the oppression on a daily basis. We rarely saw white people. We only saw the person who owned the land, and the person who could force us to leave the land whenever he or she wanted.
You were fully committed to the struggle against racial oppression. When did your political and social consciousness emerge? Tell us about the actions you took against the oppression imposed by a system run by rich and white men.
Well, often they weren't that rich. It's just that they were white. And in that society, if you were white, you were automatically considered superior to any Black person, even if they had advanced degrees in university. I was very aware that we were poor, and that we were poor because we worked for people who owned all the land and all the good housing and all the schools. But my parents managed to build a school for us, our community. I'm always speaking up for our community because we realized that we loved ourselves, even if the white people did not. And so my parents and the other people built a school, and the white people burned it down. And then they built another one. So we were very aware, what the struggle was to educate our community. So what I'm saying is that as children, we were not, we were shielded to a great extent from the day-to-day humiliation that our parents suffered. And then by the time I became a young adult at 17, I left home to join the movement against racial oppression. So my feeling was always, and I see now that my parents' love for us gave us the energy to fight back, even though it frightened them that we would do that.
Tell us about Professor Howard Zinn. What do you remember about him, um, whom you knew at Spelman College?
Well, the world knows him as a really famous historian and radical, and he was all of that. But I came to know him just as my friend, and also to understand that he had also been poor, that he'd come up in a poor Jewish family. His father worked in the shipyards, and that's where he also worked until he went away to the army, where he became a bombardier, which was the last thing in the world that someone with his kind of heart should have had to do, because he did not want to be dropping bombs on people. Uh, but he helped us at Spelman because our school was very much a sophisticated kind of ladies in making school, where it was very challenging to become a rebel. And of course, I was a rebel, partly because I was a poet and I was studying French. I was in the French house and I was studying, all the great poets, and I was translating poetry and loving it, but also, protesting and trying not to be arrested, because if I were arrested, they would kick me out of the school. But actually, they kicked him out instead. And because they did that, I left as well.
All right. And what other figures have been important influences in your personal and activist life?
Well, Stoughton Lind, who was also a teacher of history at the same school at Spelman, who went to Hanoi to try to talk sense into somebody there about the Vietnam War. And he was at Yale as a professor, and of course they got rid of him for speaking out. And he was fine. He died recently, actually, so I'm feeling it now. But he was also a great radical and someone who stood up for what he believed. I was very blessed my whole life so far to be around people who stood for good values, you know, protect each other, the world, the peace of the world. Yeah.
When did you begin writing and for what purpose?
I began writing as a very young child, and I think I was writing to keep myself company. We were a large family, 8 children, 2 parents, and there was often not enough room, really, for each child to have full attention. And so I was the last one, and I learned to comfort myself as I see it now by creating worlds that I labored as a young person, 11, 12, 13, 14, to bring into being through writing.
Alice, you married a white man, Melvin Rosenman, when intermarriage was illegal in the state of Georgia. What were the consequences of this union in an America that refused equal rights for all?
Well, it's interesting that you pose it that way. It was illegal in the entire South, not just in Georgia where I was born. It was illegal everywhere in the South. And the reason we married in Mississippi, we married in New York and went to Mississippi, was to challenge it, the law, to challenge the legal terrible decision to make it illegal for people to marry if they wanted to. I'm not a big fan of marriage. I just want you to understand that it was just that after 300 or 400 years of people telling people, that they could not marry someone they loved, it seemed very natural to rebel. And we were very happy.
In 19, that's the most important thing.
Hmm.
In 1982, you became the first African American woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for your 10th novel, The Color Purple. It's one of the five most widely read novels in the United States, and it has been translated in dozens of languages. What has changed for you in that particular, and has it had an impact on how black women are viewed in American society?
Well, first of all, let me just say, people often like to say it was the first novel by a black writer to win the Pulitzer. Before that time, the Pulitzer was not offered to black people, so there's something really very I was going to say unfair, but really it's a kind of sleight of hand way of pretending that all these years, this was a prize that went to black people just as it went to white people. This is not true. And even when they were trying to decide whether I should receive it for The Color Purple, there were people who were part of the decision who were absolutely against it, who thought it was just terrible. And it was the same racist way of excluding, I mean, some of the people on the panel, they would have kept black right. I mean, there are so many black writers who should win any prize. I mean, they should win all the prizes well before I was even born. And I'm just saying this because you are you, and you will understand what I'm saying about the structure of racism in a country where they try to get by saying, oh, she's the only one, as if, there were no others. And that's just crazy. There were many people who would have won any prize they offered if they had allowed black people to accept the prize or to even try out for the prize.
You say that this book, The Color Purple, is a remedy for many people because it makes them freer, and that is the reason for its success. Could you tell us more about it?
Well, I think for women, it definitely makes women feel like they don't have to accept relationships with men that are detrimental to their health, mental health, physical health, whatever. That there are plenty of other relationships in the world that they can relate to other women. This is a great liberation, because women, why should you actually think that you have to just relate to men if you have not found a man who treats you well? And also for men, in the person of Mr., the guy who's so terrible, it's an opportunity for men to see that they have another side to their personalities than the side that brutalizes women. They can actually learn to relate to women as equals. I mean, it's not impossible. So I think that it has been very good medicine for a lot of Black people and, all kinds of people around the world, because the oppression of women is worldwide. It hasn't let up. I mean, it has been, something that is really beneath, it should be beneath the human um, behavior bar. I mean, it just should not be any more than that people would abuse children. Women often are abused largely often because they have become pregnant.
Alice, what is the book that you are most attached to and why?
In the world, in the whole world. The book
Yes,
I'm most attached to in the whole
yes,
world.
yes.
Oh God. I'm attached to so many. I love books. I love writers. They're, right this minute, I'm reading an incredible novel by Barbara Kingsolver, and it's called uh, what is it called? Deadman something. But it's incredible. I mean, I'm so thrown by your question, I can't remember the full title. But books are so essential to my life, and I love writers. And as I was mentioning to you, because you said that you grew up um, in Algeria, I was mentioning to you that Albert Camus was just completely. I did my thesis in college on him because he's such a wonderful writer and such a rebel. I mean, I love his spirit.
A broader question related to
Mhm.
the previous one. Who are the people, authors, writers, or personalities or causes that have inspired you?
Well, as we both know, the Cuban Revolution. When I realized that Fidel was speaking for the people who were exactly like my parents, speaking for the people whose children often had no shoes, and who had to build their own schools only to have the landlord burn them down. It was just very natural for me to feel that I had found a brother, that there was someone in the world who could see that and who was speaking to that inequity. And of course, right next to him was uh, uh, our dear bad God,
No worries.
um, Che. No, Che. Che. I
Che
was getting a
Guevara.
little, yeah, I was getting a little confused because I also wanted to bring in Celia Sanchez. Now she is the revolutionary, totally good friends with both Che and Fidel, but she's rarely mentioned. I mean, and right there, you see that among the three of them, if it were left to them, this would not be. She would be honored. But because the world can only see, the masculine revolutionary, she's often lost. And without her, there probably
That's
would
right.
not have been a revolution.
That's right. And who are the people who inspire you today?
The people who inspire me today, um, I think they're people who are not giving up. I'm amazed that people are not giving up. I mean, it looks so dire. I mean, I was trying to talk to someone today about how Nostradamus said at this period in our lifetime, we would have a third world war, that there would be a nuclear war. And it would basically send us back to, way, way back. And as Einstein said, the fourth world war would be fought with sticks and stones if we have a third world war that's fought with nuclear weapons. Well, we're very close to having a nuclear weapons exchange. I mean, yeah, if we even can exchange, they're so fast, these bombs. So there's an organization called Code Pink that I really like because they never let up on, wanting justice for Cuba, wanting justice, in the war area. Um, yeah, I mean the people I admire are just still going on, and often losing so much ground and actual members. People are dying, people are, but that's what I admire. I admire people seeing what is real, seeing what is true, not abandoning their principles, understanding when the people that they love who've been so brave, like Fidel and Che and Celia, not abandoning them because, people will rewrite history and try to. I actually saw a program that said that Fidel Castro ruined the Cuban economy. It was so extraordinary that they would even have the nerve to try to run that out there. I mean, do we all remember what the Cuban economy was like when he came to power? You know, I
Exactly.
mean, do we remember? And Celia, what I love about her was that she was very good at actually documenting what was going on against the Cuban children by the mafia who had come in and taken over so much of the casinos and the places where you could prostitute children. I mean, this is a part of what Fidel and Che and those people were trying to rout. They were trying to get rid of it. Um, and we mustn't forget that, you know.
Absolutely. Alice, you say that change begins with oneself. What is the duty of intellectuals in general today, writers, academics, journalists, and others, according to you?
To have a passion for what is real. You know, it really matters that you begin to see through the smoke, and mirrors, that you just refuse to be fooled. Because in that state of being bewitched, you go day to day as the whole world just slides into one disaster after another. Stay alert as much as you can. I know sometimes we can't stay alert all the time because we just get tired. I get tired. But I also feel it's a duty to the people who struggled so hard in the past to pay attention as well as I can and not be duped, by the forces that are so good at it.
Alice, the oldest form of domination is that of men over women. You are fully committed to the struggle for women's rights. What remains to be done to achieve true equality today? And what is the role of education in this struggle?
Everything remains to be done, which is really despairing. In our country, women have lost the right to abortion. And if you cannot control what is happening in your own body, you're a slave. So we have gone, 100 years backward. And this means that the struggle to be free is constant and eternal. And we don't even have to think about, women in other parts of the world where they've never had a breath of freedom. I did work for many years, 10 years, on female genital mutilation, which is one of the largest insults to humanity that you can imagine. And the danger it has placed the people, especially of Africa and some of the Middle East, but other places as well.
Alice, could you tell us something about your experience as a university professor?
Um, it wasn't some of my happiest work. I mean, I enjoyed some of my students, but it was a job, basically. I needed to raise the funds so that I could write my novels. And as you may know, that each book requires what it requires: time, somewhere to live, some way of taking care of your child if you have one. Um, so I did. I mean, I often enjoyed it. I mean, I like bringing to the classroom. For instance, I like at Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley, I taught a class called Visions and the Spirit. And it was partly about how some of the slave narratives, some of the people who were enslaved, they kept going because they had an incredible spiritual imagination that they used to lift them out of, just extreme poverty, degradation, drudgery. And they managed to have a connection to God. Now, their God may not be what other people have, thank goodness, but they had a spiritual um, partner in their suffering. And this meant that they could actually continue.
You say that the United States is a society that worships money. How do you view your country today?
Well, my country today, you see that very much in the leadership on both parties, that they have made so much money because they are the senators and the president and the vice president and the people who run the country very poorly. Our country's not run well at all, and we feel it. I mean, the citizens feel how badly run it is. We can't believe how badly run it is. Um, so I don't know. I mean, we suffer. We suffer. We look at other people and realize that they actually have leadership that they are proud of, that maybe the people are not stealing all the money or working with the weapons manufacturers, which is the most painful thing, that our government is in cahoots with the people who make the weapons and sell to whoever they can sell them to. And then the weapons kill the young men mostly wherever they land. And then the young women suffer. And in fact, in Ukraine, for instance, they've killed, I think, 44,000 young men. And there are all these young women now who are being asked or forced to give birth to children that are basically sold. I mean, it's just the incredible corruption that happens with this kind of war.
Alice, let's talk again about Cuba, a country that is dear to us. What does the Cuban Revolution symbolize for you, and what does it symbolize for people who are the victims of racial, social, colonial, or imperial oppression?
Well, one thing, unfortunately, that it symbolizes is that you will be punished. Cuba has been punished for standing up, for trying to be different. And I think we should confront that head on and just say, this is probably what will happen. They will try to really erase everything you've done, eradicate every good thing that you did. And then the question would be, then what? I mean, do you continue to revolt? I mean, do you continue to try to have a different system? Do you go ahead or do you cave in? I mean, what do you do? And so, I often think about that with Cuba. It's suffering now. I mean, it's always suffered for, so many things. And I've been there. I've been there when it was, they had no gas. We had to, cars would run out of gas and you have to push them. I mean, and now the food is short, for the poor people, it's very short. So it feels like a failure. And then you have to ask yourself, well, is this a failure if in fact most Cubans who would never be educated are educated, and that the ones who leave Cuba looking for a better life are educated Cubans. That means they can have a life. It's an interesting thing. I mean, Cuba is endlessly fascinating.
What do you think of the United States policy towards Cuba?
Terrible. The United States policy is one of punishment. It's a terrible thing. It's like being led by, 18th century Calvinists, people who, or even before that, by people who would burn you at the stake. It's a very punishing attitude, which is so hideous. It really makes America look so bad. I just wish America understood, that America, what it looks like to be so hard-hearted, while claiming to be a Christian country. You are basically making children go hungry, without shoes, older people without medicine. One time I went there and the maternity ward was just so sad. I mean, they had almost nothing, and they had no soap. I don't know how they kept things so clean. They did. But life does not really reward you for being mean to people. It doesn't, and that's why part of the reason why my country, the United States, is suffering. We're suffering. I mean, people still think that we're, great and blah blah blah. But look at our cities. Look at all the people who are hungry and on the street. I mean, this is suffering. And we're suffering because as the leadership, has lost compassion, if it ever had any.
You have met Fidel Castro on several times. What can you tell us about him, and what is your opinion on his legacy?
Well, he loved to talk, as the world knows. He had a good sense of humor. He knew something about everything. I mean, he was the most well-read, most up-to-date person I have ever met, except that he had never heard of female genital mutilation. And when I described it to him, he literally lost some of his color. I mean, he was very disturbed. But he, like, typically he wanted to figure out a way to stop it. I mean, it was great. It was like finally meeting a really grown-up man who could feel for the suffering of women. It was remarkable. Uh, yeah, I really liked him. I mean, I really liked him. I felt that he was very human. He had this wide-ranging mind. I understood that neither he nor Che could dance, which I thought was just a pity because dancing is really crucial, to real understanding about earth, about what nature is and what the body connects to in dance. So I thought, oh, that's too bad. But other than that, I was really impressed, partly because he could listen. We were, a large table of people, and he could listen to all of us. And in the United States, I doubt that the people around that table would even be permitted close to our leadership, whoever it was, and they would not listen.
You have just published, Alice, a poem titled Earnest and Faithful in tribute to Che Guevara. Tell us about him.
Well, the first of all, I love translating their names, Ernesto and Fidel, that they actually mean earnest and faithful. I mean,
Right?
how beautiful is that? How poetic is that? Here they are, earnest and faithful, and they were. They were both really dedicated to what they were doing. They really had so much faith in the people, so much love for the people. Um, I was very, very happy to go and be as close to Che's bones as I could get in his crypt in Santa Clara. Because when I realized, as we all did, that they had murdered him and then they had buried him somewhere nobody knew where he was. They just done this terrible thing. And then there was that awful photograph where they were all the generals and all the, little people that they had, you know, gotten to help kill him. And they're all standing around his body. Well, that was a grief. It was very, very painful. And I think around the world, people suffered. And we were intended to suffer. They wanted us to suffer. So to finally know that Fidel, somehow he had found where they buried him and that he'd gone and reclaimed his bones and then brought him back to Cuba and to Santa Clara, it was a big deal. And I was very happy to eventually, as soon as I got back to Cuba, to go to be there as close to him as I could get um, from real admiration and love and respect.
Alice, you are fully committed to the fight for the promotion of human rights. However, in the West, Cuba is often singled out on this issue. How do you view these accusations?
Well, I understand them. If Cuba succeeds, if it had succeeded in its own vision, it would have made almost every other country look retarded. And well, maybe not Finland, which I like. I like Finland a lot. I think they're very progressive. But many other countries and the ones who hate Cuba, they hate Cuba because it was trying something new, something different. Now, many people will just say, "Oh no, they were trying to be communists," but that's really a misreading. I think they became part of the quote communist, you know, not regime, but their network out of desperation because at some point they had nothing. I mean, they had been reduced to not even having chicken feed. I remember this very clearly because I raised chickens. And so they ended up, becoming more communist than they would have if they had been permitted to be free without being that. without connecting to communism and communist countries. What was the rest of the question?
So how do you view these accusations? But you understand.
No, no, I understand. And they're typical. I mean, what can they do but accuse Cuba of failing when they have made Cuba fail? I mean, the Cuba of the real dream of Cuba. They made sure that that was killed. And so then, I was saying earlier that I saw somewhere that there was a program called How Castro Destroyed the Cuban Economy. What economy? What economy? The peasants, the people who would be my people, they were out there cutting cane from sun up to sundown, no shoes, no schools, not even able to read and write. And part of what the revolution did immediately was to teach people how to read and write. So it could be that, the level of poverty that I understand is a level that some of the people in office just they don't understand it because they've never had to endure it. I mean, and that's putting it more or less generously.
I have a couple of quotes from you, and I would like you to comment on. The first one is the development of self love cures many of the ills that people suffer from, thus underlining the importance of having a good self esteem. Could you develop on this quote?
Well, it just seems, clear that if you love yourself, and why shouldn't you love yourself? You're a miracle. I really wish people could get to that they in themselves are miracles. And for that reason alone, they should be hopeful and happy on some level. And I think it's why, even though from time to time I'm daunted and I take to my bed and I suffer, but beyond that, I wake up and I see that it's an incredible universe. I mean, this world is amazing. And that keeps me going. And that could keep a lot of people going.
There's another quote that I would like to read. Love is the foundation of change and transformation. So, my question is it love for others, especially for the weakest, the forgotten, the crushed, that guides your commitment?
I don't know. I think it's just the realization that if you can have love in your heart, if you have it, uh, you're guided to what needs love and what responds to love, you know. Um, it's very challenging to try to describe this to people who actually don't understand it. It's almost like it's a forgotten tongue, it's a forgotten language, it's a forgotten emotion, but it's very powerful. And in fact, who is the Leonard Cohen? He says love is the only engine of survival. And this is true. We will get nowhere if we actually think that we can do it without love. We can't.
Alice, what is that makes you indignant today?
Um, Child trafficking. There is an incredible amount of child trafficking. You hear the most horrendous tales about child concentration camps. You hear horrible stories about children being trafficked. And also really indignant the fact that a lot of these children are used for body parts. This is horrendous to even imagine that humanity has sunk so low that this is a business in children, and shocking, and something you would never have in Cuba,
That's right.
for instance.
That's right. Last question, Alice, for you. Do you have a message that would you like to transmit to people?
Develop love, for yourself and for all around you and for plants and animals and water, and try to feel it. It's not, love has become such an abused word, that people say it and they don't have any feeling attached. But if you can develop it in your heart to really to look at this world with just admiration and love and appreciation, I think that's our only hope to actually live here in this terrible situation that we seem to be mired in a way that can make us happy. And we deserve to be happy. I mean, happiness is not something that, is just so far-fetched that most people can't have it. you know it's trying to learn what it is that actually makes you happy, and love is one of the things guaranteed to make you happy. Now I know people say, oh, but I suffered because I was in love with so and so. It's not that kind of love. I mean, it could be, but generally it's much more expensive, and it's what I wish for people.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you very much for your time. We are very honored to have our first talk in English with you, with Alice Walker, author of The Color Purple. Looking forward to inviting you again. All the best for you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alice.
Take care.
Thanks.
Yes, you are wonderful.